Patrick Hicks Music Stories presents Every Grammys Ever, the 54th Annual Grammy Awards, February 12th, 2012. So it's our second award ceremony covering the music of the 2010s, and it's another good night. 2 good Grammy years in a row? I'm shocked. Kanye West once again leads the nominations tonight with 7. He had released what many consider to be his masterpiece, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, in November of 2010, which made him eligible for this year's awards. But he is not the night's biggest winner. This is a good Grammys, but there's a lot of controversy tonight. Before we get to that, a fun thing tonight is that the Grammys bring back a host. This is the first time in 7 years that they had a host, and it's a music legend, LL Cool J. First up in Best New Artist. We see some big names tonight, like J. Cole, Skrillex, and Nicki Minaj, but the winner is Bon Iver. You'll remember we talked about his brilliant debut album For Emma Forever ago, which was released in 2007. His second album, Bon Iver, was released in 2011, and the Grammys decided that that would make him the best new artist. And some people were pretty upset about this, especially Nicki Minaj. She didn't really say anything at the time, but years later in 2020, she tweeted, "Never forget the Grammys didn't give me my Best New Artist award when I had 7 songs simultaneously charting on Billboard and bigger first week than any female rapper in the last decade, went on to inspire a generation. They gave it to the white man, Bon Iver." Hashtag Pink Friday. And Nicki certainly has a case. Her debut album, Pink Friday, was huge. She also appeared on Kanye's album, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, almost stealing the whole album with her one verse on the song Monster. A song that also featured Justin Vernon, who is the main force behind Bon Iver. But I actually think this is good. This is the kind of controversy that the Grammys should have. Bon Iver is not a wildly absurd pick like Mark Cohen back in the 90s. It just as easily could have gone to him, or Nicki, or J. Cole, or Skrillex. Alright, now let's get to Song and Record of the Year. It is the same song winning in both categories. It's a monster, Adele's Rolling in the Deep. In Song of the Year, she beats out Kanye's All of the Lights, Bruno Mars' Grenade, Bon Iver's Holocene, and Mumford & Sons' The Cave. And in Record of the Year, she beats out all those same songs, except instead of the Kanye song, it is Katy Perry's Firework. But this was an absolutely huge song. Adele really owned this year, so you can't really have too many complaints here. But you can have complaints in Album of the Year. Let's get to the nominees there. So Adele is nominated for her album 21. We also see Lady Gaga get another nomination for Born This Way. Rihanna gets her first Album of the Year nomination for Loud. Bruno Mars gets his first Album of the Year nomination for his album Doo-Wops and Hooligans. And finally, Foo Fighters get their second Album of the Year nomination for the album Wasting Light. Foo Fighters have a pretty good night, winning Best Rock Performance, Best Hard Rock/Metal Performance, Best Rock Song, and Best Rock Album for Wasting Light. But that's it, that's the whole list. And there is no Kanye West, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy nominated. This was heavily criticized by journalists at the time. The album was incredibly critically acclaimed. It was named Best Album of the Year by numerous publications. It did win Best Rap Album, but doesn't even get a nomination here. But before we talk about what did win, let's talk about some albums from 2011 that were not nominated. Okay, so because the Grammys refused to follow a calendar year for nominations, Kanye West actually has another album snubbed this year. In August of 2011, he released his collaboration with Jay-Z, Watch the Throne. Now this does get some nominations and wins. The song Otis wins Best Rap Performance, and Watch the Throne does get nominated in Best Rap Album, but loses to Kanye's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And next year, the biggest single from this album does win some Grammys, but the album as a whole kind of gets shafted. Another one from this year is the Decemberists' The King is Dead. Now this is the Decemberists' 6th album, and I'm a big fan of this band. I don't think this one is their best. I don't think it should have been nominated for Album of the Year or anything, but I point it out just because this did get the band their one and only Grammy nomination. They were nominated for the song Down by the Water in Best Rock Performance, but lost to the Foo Fighters. Speaking of great bands getting their first Grammy nominations after years of putting out great albums, Fleet Foxes get their first nomination tonight in Best Folk Album for Helplessness Blues, but they lose to The Civil Wars. Eddie Vedder also got a nomination in that category for ukulele songs. You also had another album from Radiohead, The King of Limbs, St. Vincent with her fantastic third album, Strange Mercy, one that was very celebrated at the time, but not totally uncontroversially so, Tune Yards with the album Who Kill, And then finally, we've got 2 debuts that I'm not surprised were not on the Grammys radar, but let's talk about them because they're going to become 2 of the most important artists of the upcoming decade. You had Kendrick Lamar's Section 80 and Frank Ocean's Nostalgia Ultra. And the Grammy goes to Adele's 21. Adele gets her first Album of the Year win, but not her last. She's the big winner tonight. She gets 6 Grammys. She ties the record Beyoncé had just set for the most wins by a female artist in one night. She also becomes just the second artist after Christopher Cross to win all Big 4 awards. Although she didn't win them all in one night, she had won Best New Artist a couple years ago, but still only the second person to ever do it. And this is marred slightly by Kanye's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy not even being nominated. I would have been fine if this album won either way. It could have been a great debate in history. Should Adele have beaten Kanye? Sort of like Forrest Gump beating Pulp Fiction and Shawshank Redemption. But that's why the Oscars are so much better than the Grammys. The Grammys, even in a pretty good year, can't even get the nominations right. Although one thing I forgot to mention, one thing that the Grammys can say that they have over the Oscars, at this year's awards they get rid of gendered categories. No more Best Male and Best Female like the Oscars have Best Actor and Best Actress. From now on at the Grammys, it's just Best. But this is a great album. I love Adele. Good win. Good night for the Grammys. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time for the highs and lows of the 55th Annual Grammy Awards in 2013.